Hi again, everyone. It's Raj Giri with the Wrestling Inc. podcast with the special post NXT TakeOver podcast. We usually don't do them after the takeovers, but we're going to start doing them. So it's the first one, and I'd like to welcome Dennis Farrell, who does the weekly podcast with Petey Williams, and I'd like to introduce Josh Isenberg. Guys, how are you doing?
I'm great, Raj. How's it going?
Good. And how about you, Dennis? Did I just jack up your last name?
No, you got it right, man. I appreciate it. I'm doing good. I'm excited for this paper. This was a great pay-per-view. I grew up a WCW guy, so this was really exciting for me.
Yeah. This was, I got to say, I just feel like the NXT TakeOver events are just consistently the best shows that WWE has. They're just the perfect length at 2.5 hours. And they're perfectly booked, and I just thought this was a great show.
I thought it was a great show as well, because I think when you look at NXT, you see all these young guys that we haven't seen on, NXT TakeOver events like Sullivan, like the Velveteen Dream. So no matter where you see NXT going, they always reload. They don't, rebuild. They reload with talent. So I think that's the biggest thing to take out of this is the winners of these matches tonight are the future. They're not guys that have been there for 1 or 2 years. There's a bright future in NXT, Raj. Dennis, I think as you saw this tonight, a lot of fans love to see young guys getting the opportunity.
Right, and Velveteen Dream, man, I think that guy's a superstar in the making.
I think so too. I mean, he had the tights similar to Rick Rude. I think everybody loved immediately. But this guy is an athlete. Patrick Clark obviously is his real name. And he came into Tough Enough, I believe.
Yeah.
And he's been a guy in Baltimore, Maryland raised, and a guy who's been in the independent circuit for a few years. I've seen a couple of his indie matches a couple of years ago, but this is a guy that has the athletic ability, but they finally found a gimmick for him, a more sultry, a more intriguing kind of Tyler Breeze for NXT. What do you guys think about, obviously, you saw him lose, but I think this was the best loss of the night.
Yeah, this was. I thought this was one of those cases where both guys got over, and the way they did it at the end with Aleister Black finally saying his name, I just thought this was one of those cases where even in losing, he became a bigger star, by far.
From opening to end, this was the best match of the night for me, and I was more excited for WarGames going in than anything else. The Velveteen Dream wowed me. I became an instant fan of his. I thought leading up to this match, he did a good job. I wasn't quite sold. I didn't know if this match was going to work. I know Aleister Black is one of those guys that can, almost like AJ Styles, make anybody else look good, but Velveteen didn't need that, and you could tell in this match.
Yeah, I think with Velveteen, I mean, you saw his energy and his emotion and him really tap into what we've tried to see over a few weeks, but they didn't give us the whole plethora of what he could be. So he sold the match based on storytelling, not necessarily move to move like you saw, for instance, in WarGames, which was a great match nonetheless. But this was more intimate in a strange way where we weren't sure how to feel about Velveteen Dream, but he pulled out more emotion from Aleister Black than I think we've seen in any match. And Black's a great competitor. We saw Velveteen Dream pull out even more of Aleister Black's personality.
Yeah. So let's start at the top here. So the show opened up with Cassius Ohno versus Lars Sullivan. Pretty much just a glorified squash match, just a showcase for Sullivan. But it was still, it was good for what it was. It wasn't boring. It wasn't bad. And it made all the sense in the world. It's clear they got big plans for Lars. I see them giving him kind of like a Baron Corbin push on the main roster. Guys, Dennis, what did you think of this match?
I didn't know what to make. The opening match, you're just kind of getting settled in. You're getting the drink. You got your popcorn ready. And this was one of those quick bang matches that it didn't go too long. It was the perfect length. And I left thinking, I was once again wowed by Lars because there were a few times he kind of worked like a small man in this match, and he wasn't. So another match where I left going, and I know I'm going to sound fanboyish, and the people are going to jump all over me, but I can't find a negative on this whole pay-per-view card at all to complain about. And even with this opening squash match, there was nothing negative about it.
The only negative I had was Mauro Ranallo's Mamma Mia got on my nerves a little bit. But that was it.
Did you count how many times he actually said that tonight?
It's like 3, right?
I thought 3 or 4, yeah. It was early and often. But looking at Lars Sullivan and Cassius Ohno, I think it's just a big difference on a Vince McMahon guy compared to a guy that's having his second stint in NXT. I don't discredit Cassius Ohno in the ring. I think he's a great performer in the ring. His look isn't appealing to, I think, 85-90%. But you see a guy like Lars Sullivan, I mean, his quads are bigger than my entire body, and I'm not the smallest cat in the bag. So it's interesting to see what Lars Sullivan can do, especially considering Cassius Ohno is probably the same size as him, but the vast difference of what their body looks like really shows you that Lars Sullivan's in for a big push in NXT.
How big is Lars? Let's take a look here, because he just looks like, I just think Brock when I see him.
I think so too. He just looks like a naturally big guy.
Yeah, his 6'3", 303 pounds is what he's built at. Yeah, he's huge, and he's got it. I mean, I think his growling at times can be a little cheesy. Maybe you could work on that, but other than that, I mean, this guy he's a future star. He's someone that WWE is going to push hard.
Can I maybe utter the most nerdiest words that maybe ever uttered on this podcast?
Glenn has gone to Broadway musicals. I'm sure you can't beat that.
I'm gonna push him to the limit. Then I came into this pay-per-view already hating Cassius Ohno because on WWE 2K18 in career mode I had to go up against him and I had to reset the game like 20 times. So I already hated Cassius Ohno to begin with. But I thought he did an okay job tonight. But this was Lars all over. It was great.
Well, I mean, everyone has their reasons, I guess.
He trumped the nerdy comment, by the way. So.
Yeah. Cassius, I think, the dude can go in the ring, but I think it's clear kind of where they have him pegged. I don't see him getting the main roster, and if he does, it's not going to be pretty. So, but he's such a talented dude that I wish they'd do more with him. Maybe put him in a tag team. I don't know, something with Luke Harper, because Harper and Rowan is kind of a dead gimmick as it is. So anyway,
well, I think they dropped the ball on him whenever they had that hot feud with Hideo Itami, and they didn't really cash in at NXT TakeOver. They ended up putting Aleister Black versus Itami, which was very surprising to me. Not necessarily, not saying that Aleister Black didn't deserve that opportunity, but you had Hideo Itami and Cassius Ohno, this like friendship feud that was a lot better than most things that they had at the time.
Yeah.
So it was surprising to me that they didn't go full out with that, and maybe giving Ohno the win, especially since we haven't seen Hideo Itami since then.
Yeah, and he wasn't on the card tonight. So we went to a break. When we got back, we saw Tyler Bate, Trent Seven, Mark Andrews, and Wolfgang at ringside, and then they had the different segments throughout the night where William Regal walks in and starts talking with each team backstage. And then we went to Velveteen Dream versus Aleister Black. And we talked a lot about Velveteen Dream. I think the dude's a superstar. If he doesn't make his gimmick too cheesy, but he stands out. He's different. Tyler Breeze, I thought, is too I always felt he was too weak to come across as a top star. Whereas Velveteen Dream doesn't, once he's in the ring, he doesn't come across as weak. And I think that makes a difference. But, we got to talk about Aleister Black, too. The dude is awesome. And he's having these, show-stealing matches on all these pay-per-view events, like he had with Hideo Itami last time. I think this guy's ready. Josh?
I think he's ready. I think when you do the comparisons to Velveteen Dream and Tyler Breeze, Velveteen Dream looks like a star because he's 6'3". He's shredded from top to bottom. Then you see Tyler Breeze, who's a great performer nonetheless. But I agree, he wasn't as extremely physical and aggressive in the ring. He got off more in his flash than anything else. Dream's a guy who can tap into his anger, his potential, and his character. Tyler Breeze owned the gimmick, but the gimmick didn't translate in the ring based on moves. Velveteen Dream can make that snap judgment and snap reaction to go from this pretty mysterious prince-looking guy and odd personality to somebody that actually is a ground and pound technical wrestler. I think he has a huge future in NXT.
Yeah. Dennis?
I disagree about Aleister Black being ready. I think he is ready, but you look where the main roster is, and maybe even 205 if he ends up there. I think it's a disaster waiting to happen because there may not be anything for him to do up there. I hate to see someone like him end up on 205 Live. He could pass as an Intercontinental Champion. He could pass as a United States Champion. But if they're not serious about putting him into either one of those pictures, he just becomes wasted talent, where on NXT right now, he's the big fish in the little pond. And I like him there until they can make the changes on the big roster to really enhance his talent. But you're right. There's nothing negative about him.
Yeah. And in my guess, I think they should go with him and, Andrade Cien Almas. I mean, usually they go with the rematch after. But I said this after the last takeover with Drew. I'm like, when Ben sees Drew and just how he looks now, he's huge. He's obviously been working out. He's in tremendous shape with the beard. He looks tough and everything now. Like, he's not going to be long for NXT. He's going to be getting called to the main roster, and I think we're seeing that, with what happened later. But Aleister Black in the main event picture, I think fits. But to Dennis, your point. I always forget how small he is because of the guys he's been working with. He's been working with smaller guys, so you never see that he's not really a big guy. He comes across as a bigger guy with the way he works. But yeah, I mean, that definitely we've seen how smaller guys have to have more struggles on the main roster than say a Lars Sullivan.
I think the thing that Aleister Black has is he might be just 6 foot and under 210 pounds, but his striking abilities, I mean, he looks bigger and stronger than a Finn Balor, say, because Finn Balor has this small figure to him. Aleister Black's not chiseled, not cut like guys like Finn Balor is or Velveteen Dream. He just looks like a physical guy that could just brawl you in a bar. Maybe it's the tattoos, maybe it's his ability to strike top to bottom on opponents. But it's going to be interesting to see how they transition Aleister Black, because I look at him like a guy like Shinsuke Nakamura in terms of build, in terms of striking abilities in the ring. He relies a lot on his kicking. He relies on a lot of his timing to get over, and we've seen Nakamura have some struggles on the main roster. Aleister Black, though, has a voice, and Nakamura doesn't have that voice, so that could be the ultimate deciding factor on if he would ever get over in the main roster, is the fact that he can talk and connect. He hasn't done much of it, but whatever he's done has connected with the NXT universe.
Yeah. And Dennis, to your point about his size and not being called to the main roster because of it, he's kind of always going to have that, right? Regardless of when he does get called up. I mean, that's always going to be the issue. He's always under 6 feet tall. So it's like, do you never do it then because of his size?
You might look at Neville's roadmap on the main roster and might predict that might be the same struggle. You look at Neville, and when he turned heel, he had everything going for him that he deserved better than 205 Live on the main roster. I mean, he made me believe that he could be a secondary champion on the main roster. So I kind of feel like that's what Aleister Black will have to do. Is he's got that attitude. He's got that Neville attitude. It's just, can he make everybody else buy in on him? And at United States, maybe Intercontinental Champion, I think that would be awesome to see him in the Miz, because Miz is not well defined. He doesn't have a well chiseled body, so I think you could pass that off as. But you'd have to maybe match him up against guys that aren't as chiseled on that Intercontinental moving forward.
Yeah, that's where I think WWE has dropped the ball with the Cruiserweight title, as where they make it kind of this almost like a comedy title. All the segments are comedy. The main segment last week was who's going to get put in the cake on last week's episode of 205 Live. That's your title program. But if you just had it where you had serious stuff and guys like Aleister Black and Neville and where they got to cut promos and really get their personalities over, because there's a lot of talented guys that are under 220 pounds that you could use, and if given the right opportunity, and not treat them like they're less because they are smaller.
Let me throw this out to both you guys, because PD and I had this question asked to us on our podcast from a fan, and I thought this would be perfect to ask you guys. Would 205 Live succeed more if it was hooked onto NXT. 205 Live was based in Orlando and at the center and all that stuff. And you would see a 205 Live pay-per-view kind of like NXT. And maybe after NXT, 205 Live comes on, something like that, as opposed to just kind of being an afterthought on the main roster.
I think that's absolutely what they should have done, because that's how these guys got over on the Cruiserweight Classic, is in that small, intimate crowd at Full Sail. That's pretty much how this show came about. I think that's what I thought would have happened immediately for the Cruiserweight division, and maybe spotlighted a little bit either before the Raw tapings or, maybe before the SmackDown tapings. It's interesting to me to see them utilize these guys in such a fluctuated way. I mean, you had Neville really dominate the division and then have a new opponent every single month. So the dominance of Neville benefited Neville, but then you kind of saw everybody else fall down the wayside. Well, there wasn't one other guy that was even close to Neville for the longest time. Maybe in Austin Aries. It would definitely have benefited if they continued to keep it at Full Sail University like they did with the Cruiserweight Classic.
Absolutely. That's what I've been saying on the podcast, is if they would just have added an extra day of tapings when they do the NXT tapings for 205 Live, you do it at the same kind of setting that you had for the Cruiserweight Classic tournament. And then I think you got something, because, the atmosphere, everything would fit. Doing it after SmackDown with a dead crowd and people leaving and no one responds to anything just is not working. So yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting, because I think a lot of the guys have that size issue. I mean, even, Kyle O'Reilly, Bobby Fish, Adam Cole, we'll see, how they're treated on the main roster, I guess, when they get there. So anyway, fantastic match. Dream doing a lot of Rick Rude stuff, with the hips, the Rude Awakening. At the end, Black hit a big boot to the face. Dream hit a big super kick. Black hit a big knee to the face to drop Dream. Dream started talking some trash, but Black nailed him with the Black Mass for the pin. As we said, in my opinion, this was the best match of the night.
Yes, absolutely. And I wasn't bothered at all by the Rick Rude stuff. I thought that only enhanced his character. Rick Rude was a little bit of a flamboyant character back in the day, if you really watch his stuff. So I think that only enhanced him. In the moment of the night was when they both kind of stole each other's moves, where you saw Velveteen do the sit down, and then you saw Alistair do that crawl. I you know what? I marked out for it. I'm not even gonna lie. I thought that was probably like the one moment of the night where I went, that was great.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny too, because you see a lot of people mimic guys like Macho Man and Shawn Michaels, but there might not have been a more controversial and developed character than Rick Rude at his prime. I mean, this guy was so good. He just never was that main event guy like Macho Man or Shawn Michaels that you say, oh, he's one of the best of all time. So it's refreshing to see that, because you see so many other guys be mimicked over and over and over again, but you rarely see Rick Rude do that, or somebody do that to Rick Rude.
It's weird. It felt fresh, even though, because he was using it, but he had his own character. His character is still very different, so he's using the mannerisms. And it felt like he just managed to blend it really well, to where it didn't feel corny. It didn't feel like he was ripping someone off. He felt like he was paying tribute, but making it his own.
Sure.
After that, we had the Fatal 4-Way for the vacant NXT Women's title. Nikki Cross, Kairi Sane, Peyton Royce, Ember Moon. Another really good match. I got to say, the Kairi Sane, that pirate thing, I don't get it. I mean, I've been to Japan. I've seen like the commercials, and they're a little wacky. So I don't know if it's something with that, but to me, it's like if Roman Reigns dressed up like a cowboy going to the ring, and then that was it. Then, he got rid of the cowboy gear and, was himself. So I don't know. It's just, I don't get it.
Did you guys just go ahead?
Go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say that Fatal 4-Way match, and obviously giving the nod to Ember Moon and then Asuka coming in with the championship. My question to you guys was, Ember Moon lost in pay-per-views, and now they give her the championship. I just kind of felt like it devalued her as a champion now, because it took her to not face Asuka to win the title. Do you think it would have benefited more for her to actually beat Asuka and then potentially defend it against somebody on this pay-per-view?
I thought that too. I thought, like, by making a point how she couldn't beat Asuka, and then you have Asuka giving her the belt at the end, it's like she's not the top lady. you know?
Yeah.
Whereas if you would have had Peyton Royce win it and then, you know, like steal a victory and Ember Moon, and then that's your next feud is Peyton Royce and Ember Moon, and have Ember Moon beat Peyton for the title, then you don't have that. I don't know. I think by having Asuka there and bringing that up, it just felt like not the best person who wanted the belt, even though I think she is the best wrestler in NXT right now, best female wrestler. Dennis?
I'll say it did not bother me so much because Asuka is a bona fide Hall of Famer come up. She was, you know, the light years ahead of everybody else in that ring. We knew it. The wrestlers knew it. And I don't think it was a secret. So when Moon won it, I was okay with it because, of course, no one could beat Asuka. That's why she held it for 500 and something days. That's why they allowed her to vacate it and leave with a standing ovation. So, sure, we all know it. It wasn't a secret. Now Amber's the top dog in the company. So I think it was only the right move. You know, she paid her dues. She was next in line. We all kind of know how it works. And we knew, you know, same thing with Asuka on the main roster. If they book her right, no one can beat her, maybe Charlotte, and that will be down the line. So I think that's just it's natural. I was okay with it.
Derek bringing up in the comment section in the chat, who thought that Asuka was going to attack Ember? Because it almost looked like it with the way they were setting it up. Like if they were both on the main roster, that would have been an attack, you know?
I thought a little bit. I was kind of holding my breath, but at the same time, it did make sense. There was no payoff, but I was waiting for it.
Yeah.
He's right.
I like seeing Asuka be that, you know, aggressive kind of heel because she did that for such a long time in NXT. You know, she was cheered and cheered because she was so good, but she had so many heel characteristics throughout her entire reign. Towards the end, she was basically a heel for 4 or 5 months. Yeah, if it was the main roster, I could have easily seen that happen. Ember Moon deserves the championship. I just wonder now, looking at the other women, Kairi Sane, I agree with you, Raj. I think it's an interesting gimmick that I don't think is going to get over long term for NXT. But Peyton Royce and Billie Kay, I think those are two that they don't necessarily need to win the NXT Women's Championship to get a call up to the main roster and make an impact on the main roster. I think they're the next two in line for that. And there might be 1 or 2 more matches or 1 or 2 more opportunities that they get. Their gimmicks are so good, kind of like Cool, 7 or 8 years ago, where they can get on the main roster and make an impact. I don't think they need to be in the NXT much longer.
Yeah, it was weird with Asuka. I thought she seemed older with wearing, just regular street clothes or what. I don't know what she was wearing. She almost seemed like she was her teacher or something out there. So it was kind of odd, but a great match. At the end, we saw Peyton, crotch Ember Moon, drops Kairi Sane to the floor with a knee. Peyton ran back in, fought with Cross. Ember came off the top and hit the Eclipse on Peyton and Cross at the same time. Kind of got Nikki Cross more with that. Ember covered Cross and won the title. So the first of 2 title changes. All the titles changed here tonight that were on the line. So, the new NXT Women's Champion, Ember Moon, well-deserved. Again, I wish they wouldn't have kept bringing up the Asuka stuff because I think to the TV viewer, it made her feel like not the best.
Yeah.
Kevin Owens was shown at ringside. He was wearing a Undisputed Era T-shirt. Samoa Joe was shown at ringside too. And then we went to the NXT title match. I think a lot of people were surprised by this. I actually wasn't. Andrade Cien Almas versus Drew McIntyre. Really good match. I think this was. I thought this was probably Drew I thought this was easily better than McIntyre's match with Bobby Roode at TakeOver, the last TakeOver, and really, really good match. And who I thought that was the show stealer in this was Zelina Vega. I thought she was awesome. Josh.
Yeah, I think Zelina Vega makes Andrade Cien Almas a main eventer.
Yeah,
and it's easily shown because she's so good as a mouthpiece. But she shows, I actually compare her to Lita because she has that flying ability in the ring. She's a little aggressive, a little edgy. But I am a huge Drew McIntyre fan. I have been ever since he was in WWE, his first stint. But as champion, he's kind of And I think it's just because it's been a couple of months since we've seen a pay-per-view. And the way that they've booked it, it's been more about the Undisputed Era and Sanity and Authors of Pain over who he should face for the NXT Championship. But I'm okay with this title change because I think Cien Almas has been one of the best performers in NXT in quite some time. He had a great match against Johnny Gargano at NXT to kick off that pay-per-view in Brooklyn. He's always been the guy that's faced the newcoming, the guy that comes into NXT for the first match. So he's definitely been another guy that's paid his dues. It's surprising because the feud and the storyline wasn't extremely developed. They kind of rushed it together in 3 weeks. But it's going to be more interesting to see how Drew McIntyre is viewed now. I obviously think Drew McIntyre is better as a heel than he is as a face. But Cien Almas is such a good heel right now.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm guessing, like I said, that after the last takeover, I just didn't think Drew's going to be on the in NXT for too long. He's got the main event look. He looks like a star, and I agree with you. I think as a babyface, he doesn't have that charisma like that Finn Balor had before, and Finn I think was the best babyface that NXT has had, and then Nakamura after. So it definitely has been lacking, but he's a superstar, and I see him going to the main roster real soon. If not, who knows? Maybe they send him right away. But yeah, I thought really strong match. Zelina Vega. I love that Lita reference because that's exactly what I was thinking when I watched it. Dennis?
I came into this match not expecting a title change. I really felt like there was no way they were going to put the belt on Alma. And when they did, I was shocked. But I was pleased because I found myself rooting for him at the end. The packages, if this was your first time watching NXT, that package telling that story felt like it was longer than only 3 weeks. And it really made you kind of care a little bit about what happened. So at the end, when he won that belt, I found myself kind of cheering for him. Like, hey, you know what? That good for him. If he can keep this up, he can be a star. I feel like this is going to be the moment where we find out if he's going to not be Dolph Ziggler-esque, where he's just going to be the setup man for everybody else coming into the company. It's good to see them put the belt on him. I hope he can keep up the momentum and build on his character from this moment. I'm a little worried because that's a heavy weight to carry. But Drew McIntyre scares me on the other side, where we've seen what he can do. He has been an okay champion. He wasn't the worst NXT champion I've seen. But going up to the main roster now, it's really worrying for me because I don't know if he has yet built that character up to make me care what happens to him on that main roster. Yeah.
Or they could do, like Bobby Roode was a heel. They brought him in as a face. If they bring him in as a heel, that it freshens him up. So,
and I think that's a good opportunity for him to come in as a heel because, he's getting cheers, but he's not getting the Shinsuke Nakamura or Finn Balor or hell, even a heel Bobby Roode cheer. People know how good he is, but people want to boo him more because he's not that, like you said, that charismatic face. He's just a guy who likes to fight, and the look of him just screams heel. And especially like on SmackDown. I don't think he'd be great on Raw right now because they have so many good heels. But he'd be great on SmackDown as they're lacking, aside from Kevin Owens and a couple of others. But he'd fit perfectly on SmackDown right now as a heel.
I think you're right. That, or if you threw him in with the Bar, I think he could really fit really well with that group because they just like to fight too.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
Someone is saying that. Okay, so at the end of the match, Drew turned Almas inside out with a big Claymore kick. Vega put Almas's foot on the bottom rope. Drew missed the next Claymore attempt, and he got hung up on the top rope. Drew fell to the apron and clutched. The fans were chanting "C." Almas ended up bringing Drew back in on his head and covered him for the title. Afterwards, officials were checking in on Drew. It looked like he was legitimately banged up. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Natalie is saying that Triple H on Facebook Live is saying that Drew McIntyre is injured. So
it worked. I didn't see an X throw up, but when the official was on, you could see him clicking in on his mic a few times, reporting back. To me, I couldn't tell if it was the groin or if it was the way he was dropped on his head, because that was a very inverted angle that he came down on off that DDT. So I wouldn't be shocked if it was probably just maybe a concussion. But I'm speculating. We all saw the same thing. None of us really have the inside information yet, as everything as we're hearing is breaking from Triple H's mouth.
Yeah, it's looking like an arm injury, actually.
Oh, wow.
So we will see. I'm going to try to get more on that. So yeah, hopefully it's nothing too serious, because it definitely seemed like he's main roster bound. And so then we hear sirens going off. I don't know who else thought of Scott Steiner when the sirens are going off as a cage.
Big bad booty daddy.
Yeah. And we got a video package for WarGames. When they had when I read the shark cage idea, I remember thinking it was goofy. But when I saw it, it didn't look bad. I still think it would be better if they did it Royal Rumble style. Where they just have him come out, you don't have him as sitting there in a shark cage, just, because I always thought it was kind of weird with WCW when they did it, where they're just sitting around at ringside as well. So if you just have him come, from the back when it's time. But that being said, the other rule changes I was fine with. I thought it worked for this match, and this match was, it was a cluster, but it was awesome. Like Killian Dane doing the coast to coast and the superplex off the top of the cage, where Roderick Strong superplexed Adam Cole onto everyone, where it looked like someone could have gotten seriously injured if they didn't catch him right. I thought this was great. Josh, I'll shoot it over to you first.
Yeah, I thought this match was everything that everybody wanted it to be, just chaos. And Eric Young said it best, I think, on NXT a week or two ago. This match gave us a little bit of everybody. Killian Dane obviously was the one guy that stood out in my mind, but the Authors of Pain continue to be impressive. They're not going to be technical wrestlers for 15, 20-minute matches, but their physical strength kind of really spotlighted what they can do with guys that are physically superior to them, guys like Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly. I was surprised to see Alexander Wolf really get busted open. You saw that, and you can tell that he was seriously injured for a bit because he was hanging out in the corner and referees were checking on him. This entire match just screamed to me that they are full 100% in on Adam Cole headlining NXT for the next year. The crowd loves him. Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly, that could be some great feuds down the road if they eventually split up in 2018. Everybody did their part here. I was very pleased with it. The rule changes were fine with me. No top of the cage was perfectly fine with me. This is something that I think fans will enjoy and fans will listen and read and react to for years to come. A great main event.
Right. I thought so too. And you know what? Dennis, go ahead. Let me get your thoughts first.
I'll say this. I was a WCW guy. I grew up on World Championship Wrestling, NWA. I've seen WarGames on pay-per-views growing up. I got that it wasn't going to be the same as it was for me growing up. I was a little disappointed that there was no top of the cage. Didn't ruin the pay-per-view. This is just me being nitpicky. It's almost like reading the book versus seeing the movie. I understand that. You can rip me away. To me, I wish there was the top on the cage. And you could have just done it the original style and had everybody kind of in their own spots around the ring. I would have been all right with that. I'll knee-jerk reaction at first. I hated the shark cage. Then I saw it and I thought it wasn't so bad. Maybe Chris Jericho and Enzo Amore really killed shark cages for me, but they made it work and it wasn't horrible. It didn't ruin the match. It didn't take away. I thought the match itself was great. It blew me away because you would never have seen that match on the main roster. You would have not seen half those moves on the main roster. They got away with it. They took every advantage. If NXT gave them an inch, they took a mile, and I was proud of it. So my small nitpickiness, it did not take away from the match. But I thought overall, for a WWE entertainment cage match by far blows away anything we would have seen on the main roster.
Yeah, and I think you could just make the cage taller and still have the roof. There is just something with that roof that I just think looks awesome. And I think it's nostalgia, because someone that's never seen the match probably could care less. But, having grown up on WarGames and seeing like Dr. Death, Steve Williams, bench pressing Terry Gordy into the top of the cage.
Yes.
Yeah, then Sid Vicious with the power bomb to Brian Pillman in the cage, onto the roof. It's just, guys, I think you could do some cool stuff with that too. But, what I was thinking is it would be cool if they could merge WarGames, the match, with Survivor Series, because a 5-on-5 elimination match is kind of passe now. They do elimination matches all the time. There's nothing really special about it. There's never really a stip. But if you had it in a WarGames cage and modify the rules a little bit, where it's you have 2 guys starting, it's 5-on-5, but 2 guys start, and every 2 minutes someone comes in, do it every 2 minutes until all 10 men are in, and then do it elimination style maybe. Then it would spice it up and make it more interesting, because right now the Survivor Series match itself is kind of nothing.
Well, I think I completely agree with you, because they have to bring on Triple H and Kurt Angle and John Cena and all these guys to make this match interesting. That's a prime example of defending your point. They should do something stipulation-wise for that match. It would just make it more entertaining, and I think overall people would care more about it. The Survivor Series pay-per-view, obviously, you see this 5-on-5 elimination match. It's bragging rights. We had that pay-per-view, which nobody cared about. That's what that is. But to talk a little bit about Dennis's point, I don't think this match would translate well on the main roster as much as it did in NXT, because of the people that they have in NXT, because the creative freedom that they give these wrestlers in NXT, and the crowd just reacts differently to every single thing in NXT, because they realize they're getting what these guys want to do, not what they're scripted to do.
Yeah. I think if you did it, I don't think you should do it for every match, just for the main event. I think the crowd would react on the main roster with if you had the same type of people involved as you have this year for the 5-on-5. I think it would just add something that Survivor Series needs, because like you said, Josh, that they really needed to add a bunch of people and bring people back to make this year's interesting. Whereas the Royal Rumble, you don't have to do that, and so clearly something with the concept is outdated.
Can I just say the one thing I noticed through this whole pay-per-view, and Raj, we're about the same age. We've watched many WCW WarGame pay-per-views, and the one thing this pay-per-view didn't have that old school WarGame pay-per-views had, there wasn't any jumping between ring to ring. If you notice, during any of the matches, they all stayed in one ring. Even the women's match, they were in one ring. They didn't, old school, you'd see them pop over to the next ring and wrestle over there and pop back in. You didn't see any of that this pay-per-view either.
Yeah, I kind of like that, though. I think save that for later. Don't do too much the first time you brought it back. You know what I mean? But, down the road, because I'm sure they're going to do this again. I think without WarGames, this takeover was there was just nothing interesting. And it's one of those shows that it was really good, but going into it, there wasn't much that really piqued your interest. But the WarGames really, the WarGames match really made it.
I wonder how many WCW guys, fans, came to watch this pay-per-view just for the WarGames. Because I won't lie, to me, the main selling point was WarGames in that match. I might, if I wasn't doing this pay-per-view, I might have passed it up to go do something else. I may have played Call of Duty or something. But as a WCW original fan, I made it a point, whether I was doing this podcast or not, to sit down and watch it, because it's nostalgia for me.
Josh?
Yeah, I'm 30 years old, so you guys have just a couple of years on me, but I've seen the WarGames matches, obviously, with the network, and I've watched pretty much all of them the past week here leading up to WarGames, just to prep myself and just to kind of understand the history of it, because I wasn't obviously there in living blood watching it. But this sold me. This stipulation sold me for this pay-per-view. I completely agree. Every other feud was good. We knew what we were going to get, exciting matches, because they never really disappoint. But this was the match that sold the pay-per-view. going forward, I would like to see this be a once-a-year type thing where, maybe the November pay-per-view before Survivor Series has this. Or if they want to do it for Survivor Series, they have the ability to do that. If they didn't have this WarGames pay-per-view, yeah, I might have been out doing something else or watching something else on a Saturday night, but I knew the nostalgia of this, and it's something we haven't seen in 20 years. And I just knew that NXT wasn't going to disappoint, even if they altered what the actual match was going to be, the original match to now. You just knew that they weren't going to disappoint you. So that definitely a selling point, and the reason why I stayed home and watched this and made sure I joined in with you guys afterwards.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It definitely going in wasn't the most interesting outside of that. But so yeah, Mark, who's MVP on these nights, man, doing the coverage. He's got an article coming up very shortly on Drew McIntyre's injury. So, stay tuned to WrestlingInc.com. Yeah, so overall, guys, out of 10, what would you guys give the show?
I'll start off, guys.
Real quick, I got to say, Killian Dane was freaking awesome in this match, too.
Yes.
Oh, it was fantastic. MVP of the night, I think.
Yeah. Him and I always have for some reason, I have a hard time saying Rosita's name. Vega, but anyway, Vega and Killian Dane, I thought were just fantastic tonight.
I'll start off the rankings, guys. I'm going to give it a solid 9. I could easily have said maybe a 9.5, but I'll say a solid 9. I was happy. I wasn't disappointed. I didn't find myself bored on any matches. Even the bathroom break match didn't happen for me. I stayed and watched every match, every second, and that's kind of how I grade a pay-per-view. I'm giving it a 9.
I'm going to go as well with a 9. I think it would have been a 9.5 if we saw more of Sullivan and Ohno going back and forth with their physicality, because I think those are two guys that look like they could fight, right? But like you said earlier in the night, it seemed more of a glorified squash, not completely one-sided, but you obviously knew what the outcome was going to be about 30 seconds into the match. But I'll give it a solid 9. The main event delivered. It gave us the future of NXT. It created new stars while still continuing to establish what they already have on the main roster or the main event level in NXT. Guys like Aleister Black, Cien Almas was made, Velveteen Dream was made tonight. So they're doing as much as possible to make this one of the deepest NXT rosters that they have in terms of talent. I give it a 9.
I'd say for an NXT show, I'd give it a 9. For me, a true 9 would have to be big stars also involved, and like a huge crowd, kind of like everything. But from a pure quality standpoint, just like in-ring action, how the show went, I'd say a 9. But then with the stars and everything, and I'd go 8.5. But freaking great show. Takeovers are just always great, and I wish they could find a way to really turn this into not, Triple H says it's another brand. It's not developmental, but everyone on there wants to go to their main roster. But it'd be cool if they could make it its own brand that, self-contained. It's not just a stepping stone to get to the main roster, and have the show on USA and get rid of that 3rd-hour Raw, have an hour NXT a week, and with that extra exposure, maybe you could get there. But I thought really strong stuff, really well booked. Just it was never bored. It was fantastic, I thought. All right. So since the last podcast we did on Wednesday, James Ellsworth was released. Surprised at how much reaction there was online. So it shows just, how well he did getting himself over. But it definitely did look like after he lost to Becky Lynch, definitely appeared like they were kind of out of ideas for him. And, it had been a year. He signed a deal last year. I don't know if they had an option and decided not to renew. But yeah, James Ellsworth gone. Guys, your thoughts? Let's start with you, Josh.
You look at James Ellsworth. He's a guy that made nothing out of something. The squash match with Braun Strowman to start, and had some odd cult following soon after. I think his stuff with Carmella towards the very end of his run in WWE was uninteresting to me. Being put on a leash and having Carmella kind of roll around with him and basically control him. Not that it wasn't a bad thing, because I think it enhanced Carmella ultimately to being with the Money in the Bank win, obviously that was so controversial to people. Oh my gosh, a man helped a woman win the Money in the Bank briefcase, and all of that surrounding James Ellsworth. But I think in the long run, James Ellsworth did 1 year and was in main event storylines pretty much the entire time.
Beat AJ Styles, what, 3 times?
AJ Styles, treated with Dean Ambrose. I mean, this is a guy that utilized nothing and made something. So I think the outpour was positive because they realized that this guy was basically living his dream every single day.
Yeah, he's them. He's what, a fan who always dreamed of getting involved, and he's kind of like living that dream, So, I don't know. Dennis?
I'll say this: when his no compete is up in February, he's coming onto our podcast as a guest. We've already talked to him. He's he is not disappointed or sad. He's happy about this. I can say that. His bookings on the independent just went up, threefold of what he's asking for, and I think he ends up back in the WWE for another short run in the future. That's my guess, based off what I've had conversations with. But we will have a more in-depth conversation in February when he is free to start doing bookings and start doing podcasts.
Yeah, I think it's too soon for him to be in this year's, the next Royal Rumble, the 2018 Royal Rumble, but who knows? I'm sure he'll make surprise appearances here and there, kind of like the Boogeyman. Okay, so real quick, Drew McIntyre update. Triple H said that he may have suffered a torn bicep towards the end of the match. So it wasn't an injury coming in, so that wasn't the reason why he dropped the title. But I think you could kind of see when he got hurt. And so he's going to undergo an MRI tomorrow, and they're saying he'll likely undergo surgery if the injury is what they think it is. So do you guys know a torn bicep?
Wasn't that what Cena had, right?
Yeah, I think he had a torn bicep. He was back in, I think, 9 weeks or something. But I think if it's a partial torn, it's about 3 to 6 weeks. If it's a full tear, it could be out for almost half of a year. But I mean, obviously rehabilitation time. That's what John Cena had. I think 2008. I think it was.
Yeah, wasn't he supposed to be out like 5 months and he came back in 2 or something like that?
Yeah, he came back at Royal Rumble to compete in that third Royal Rumble in MSG. If Drew McIntyre did suffer a full tear and he does require a few months on the shelf, I don't think that's the worst thing for him, especially if they have plans for him to debut on the main roster.
Yeah, I'm sure he just bypasses NXT completely then. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rusev had suffered one too in the past. A lot of guys have suffered it. So anyway, hopefully it's nothing, it's not going to keep him out for too long, but we'll keep our eye on it because 6 months, gosh, what is it? I'm trying to do the math. It's like May, right? Yeah, it's May, yeah, so that's past WrestleMania. Someone's saying 6 to 12 weeks. I guess that's if it's not a full tear.
That raises an interesting question. Was he originally supposed to drop the title, or in the middle of the match did he suffer the injury and they had to change everything on the fly? That's kind of an interesting question now.
I don't think so. I think it was like right at the very end. I mean, I think it was clear that it was Andrade was supposed to go over. And they finished the match. Yeah, they usually don't, will not call an audible very late like that. And yeah, I mean, you saw it with Finn Balor and Seth Rollins. So, so another big story breaking this weekend. David Otunga and Jennifer Hudson, they together for 10 years, have an 8-year-old son. Finally broke up, and she filed a protective order against him. So,
that's not good.
Yeah, it's not good. He was supposed to be doing the kickoff show for the Survivor Series this Sunday. Pulled out. Hasn't been released yet. Again, I think right now there is a you got to do the proven, guilty until innocent until proven guilty. And he's denying it, so we got to let it play out.
They're going to let him stay off TV for a while, though. And you saw this with guys like Adam Cole, who had a domestic incident involvement, and they just cut ties.
You mean Adam Rose?
Yes, Adam Rose. Yeah, that's exactly right. My apologies. No, not Adam Cole. I know his girlfriend, but no. Adam Rose, and they cut ties with him there. They're back on WWE television until this gets cleared up, and it could take a few months. I enjoyed Otunga on the pre-show. I think he does bring something to WWE's commentary team. Not live commentary during Raw or SmackDown, but their pre-show panel. a guy that could be expendable for WWE and cut ties with him. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him in 2018.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Dennis, you got anything else?
Nah, you hit the nail on the head. I think he was just a member of the team. He didn't step up when he had the opportunity. He found a nice little place on the pre-show and just kind of hung out there. So it'll be interesting to see if they find him valuable enough to keep, or if it's just easier to wash their hands. Wrestlers over the past 10 years have not done themselves any favors with the law or in the media at times. So I think this might be one of those, well, we're going to send a message to everybody else kind of moves, and it won't hurt the company. That's all speculation, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. Real quick, me and Dennis kind of gave our Survivor Series predictions on Wednesday's podcast. Josh, I would just let's get a couple of the top matches real quick. Let's all three go through them real quick. Brock and AJ, who do you guys got?
I'm going to go with Brock Lesnar. I don't think this is going to be a 4 or 5 minute match that we've seen Brock Lesnar do. But I think they make AJ Styles look extremely strong. But at the end of the day, it's going to be Brock Lesnar winning. Especially since of the quick audible of taking out Jinder Mahal and inserting AJ Styles. They're not going to bury AJ Styles, what people are going to, maybe think. But when you look at Brock Lesnar and AJ Styles, it's just two completely different breeds right now. Styles is the best performer in the world, but Brock Lesnar is always going to be protected by WWE. And even though he loses a lot, as we've seen, he's not afraid to put people over, a la Goldberg when he came back. I do think Brock Lesnar gets the victory here at Survivor Series.
I agree.
Yeah, I think Brock wins, but I think it's going to be under 10 minutes. With Braun, Samoa Joe, they didn't even go 10 minutes. I don't see them protecting AJ more than them, especially when AJ just lost cleanly to Baron Corbin, just for no reason. They beat him clean, and then Finn Balor as well. So I think Brock wins that pretty clean. And then finally, Team Raw, Team SmackDown. They never really said that. Stephanie said if you don't destroy Team SmackDown to Kurt Angle that you're fired, but they never made it a stip that Team Raw wins. If Team SmackDown wins, Kurt Angle's fired, although it's kind of been implied. Guys, what's your prediction on that? And who ends up surviving on that team or on the winning team?
I'll jump in real quick and just say I think SmackDown wins because Triple H turns and does something to Kurt Angle. I think it's no secret that the rumored match at WrestleMania is Triple H and Kurt Angle. I just assume that this is going to be the setup and the starting, putting that in motion where Triple H doesn't have ties to one show or the other because he's the NXT guy. So I can see him saying, "Screw it, I'm taking out Kurt Angle at some point in this match and costing him."
I asked Triple H about that on the media conference call the other day, just about Kurt Angle's in-ring return and about possibly facing him down the line. You can kind of tell that those wheels are in motion. Josh?
Yeah, I would think SmackDown wins. I'm not necessarily sure if Triple H will help SmackDown win for two reasons. One, obviously Stephanie McMahon is tied to Raw, and that's his wife. And the fact that I still think that they like to play off of the Shane and Triple H being brother-in-laws, but Triple H is kind of Vince's son controlling backstage. I think they still like doing that, even though it's not really spoken as much on TV. Triple H and Kurt Angle down the road, I think something happens potentially where Kurt Angle may be eliminated early or may have a misstep, so he is viewed as the weakest link. I think that's a smart idea to put them there because we're not sure if Kurt Angle can fight 15, 20 minutes, as you saw at TLC. He did a couple of spots here and there, got hurt and everything like that. So I think SmackDown gets the nod in my mind. But it's going to be interesting to see if they let the young guys, and when I mean young, I mean the new guys on the roster and Shinsuke Nakamura and Bobby Roode, shine, or they really rely on Shane McMahon, John Cena, and Randy Orton carrying the load for SmackDown.
Yeah, because you got to think Cena is going to get, a couple eliminations, at least one. You got to think Triple H is probably getting one. Kurt Angle's probably getting one. Braun, you got to think. So it doesn't leave much room for the younger guys, but we'll see. It'll be interesting. I just wish they had some, like we were saying, doing it in a WarGames cage or, adding something to it because there's really nothing outside of the big star power that has you invested in the match itself.
I'll say this. I really wish they go back to the traditional kind of card where they had, 4 different teams, 5 versus 5, 4 different matches. And then the survivors of those matches went into the kind of battle royal at the end of the night. If you've seen on some of the old school Survivor Series, they had the Survivor Battle Royal, and then have something.
Well, it was a final Survivor Series match where they had, they only did it once. Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior against a bunch of guys.
I really enjoyed when they did that, and I really wish they could utilize that a little bit more.
And they could even use that for some sort of a contendership down the road. With brand splits, have Raw versus SmackDown, and then the final match getting an opportunity to compete for the championship, kind of like an unadvertised tournament type of thing, or something like the King of the Ring, where at the end of the night there's a prize for it. It just gives you more interest in the entire card and not necessarily 1 or 2 matches.
Yeah, or you have it where the winner of the Royal Rumble competes for that title. So if Raw wins, it's, the winner of that would get a shot against, whoever's the Universal Champion. Or something like that. Or you get the number 30 spot, or you get first picks in the Royal Rumble match. Something where it ties into the Rumble, since that's the next big pay-per-view. Yeah. And that way you kind of have all the pay-per-views kind of tying in a little bit. Thank you guys. And thanks to everyone in the chat. You guys were really active tonight. We will be back. This is the first of 3 nights in a row that we'll be here. So tomorrow night, right after Survivor Series, Matt Morgan will be back. And then Monday night after Raw. So thanks again, everyone. And we'll see you tomorrow night.